So to summarise, for case-only designs, they make comparisons within individuals. The key strength is that this means that they can overcome between person confounding. Anything that can vary over time within an individual and be a confounder can remain a problem, and we need to account for them if possible. They can be very statistically efficient, and within a given population we may have narrower confidence intervals if we use a self-controlled method. And they can be good for investigating the temporal association between an exposure and an outcome, as you saw with both the antidepressant and the rotavirus examples. Both of them work best for acute exposures, or at least a well-defined risk period. So we need to be able to define when somebody's exposed to a treatment. And they both work better for outcomes that we can date well, and we know when the onset occurred. The risk periods, so the 0 to 2 days, 2 to 14 days, whatever we think it is, those periods are chosen by us as researchers. Sometimes, if there's a very broad signal of a safety issue, we may not know what those periods should be. But this would be similar for any study design. They do make important assumptions, particularly about the relationship between exposures and outcomes and how that changes over time. And we need to be very careful about those before we do the study. Okay, and that's all I'm going to say for now. So any questions before we move on to, I've got a workshop for you to have a look through, but do ask questions.
So how to design the period of the case and control? So the period, the duration.
Is this for the case crossover?
Yeah, case crossover method.
Yeah, so this is going to have to be driven by hypotheses about the exposure and the outcome and how the drug is taken. So for that example, with the benzos, they would have thought, if somebody took a benzodiazepine 3 days before the accident, I'm not interested, but I really want to know, were they taking it that day? If you were looking at something like, let's say you were interested in liver injury and an antibiotic, I think I would want to know that somebody had taken the drug maybe up to 2 weeks before having the liver injury. But maybe if it was earlier than that, I would be less bothered. It would depend on what I thought the mechanism was. So you'd need to think biologically about what the mechanism is between the exposure and the outcome, and then define what you think should be a reasonable risk window. Yeah?
So I'm a little confused the difference between the case series and case crossover design. That is a difference of control sampling. So in the case control design, we choose the narrow field sampling. And when we use the case series, we use all other fields as a control.
Yeah. So yeah, they're kind of analogous to, so the self-controlled case series is similar to a cohort design in that we are first of all defining exposed and unexposed periods of time, and then comparing what's the risk of the outcome during those periods. Okay, so that's the self-controlled case series. The case crossover, it's more similar to a case control design, because we're starting at the outcome and we're saying what was the risk of being exposed compared with some control periods where we know you didn't have the outcome.
That is the reason why the second assumption, the observation period after the outcome
Yeah.
is necessary.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I'm wondering how you can handle possible confounders. For example, the second
If it's something that you can measure and it's in your data, you just put it in the statistical model in the same way that you would if it was a cohort study or whatever it is. If it's something that you think changes over time and which we can't measure, like anxiety level day to day, we just have to claim this is something that a problem that we couldn't do anything about. There is definitely some issues that we can't handle.
You can mention the limitation.
Yeah, yeah,
I see.
yeah.
I read a book about the time varying, that's covariant, and they have method about give the more weight for the control period that is close to the case period, and give a less weight to the further period. I'm not sure whether it is also such kind of case that.
Yeah, there's a slight variation of the case crossover that's called the case time control. And I can find you the reference for this as well, but where you can take into account the fact that the population level trend can change. But that would be another way, is by giving more weight to the period that's closer to the case period, yeah.